The ring was heavier in my pocket than it should have been, like it knew something I didn't. 13 years, 13 Valentine's days, late-night talks, quiet mornings, and shared dreams had all led to this moment. I could still hear her laugh in my head, see the way her eyes lit up when we first met, and feel the warmth of her hand in mine. Tonight, I was going to ask Claire to marry me, but then I saw her. I was half a block from the restaurant where we had our first date, the one where I planned to propose. Through the frosted window, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, she sat at our usual table. She looked stunning, her auburn hair tumbling over her shoulders, her lips curved into a smile that had always been mine. Except it wasn't me sitting across from her. It was another man, someone I didn't recognize, someone who leaned in too close, his hand resting on hers like it belonged there. And the way she looked at him? It wasn't casual. It wasn't friendly. It was intimate, familiar, like they shared a world I wasn't part of. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, the ring burning a hole through my pocket. My chest tightened as 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind. Maybe it's a misunderstanding, I told myself. Maybe it's a colleague, a friend, someone she's just catching up with. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. And then, as if the universe hadn't twisted the knife deep enough, I heard a voice beside me. "Unbelievable," the man muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I turned, startled, to find a stranger standing a few feet away, his hood pulled low over his face, his eyes locked on the same scene that had shattered my world. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended, laced with a mix of confusion and defensiveness. He turned to me, and for a moment, I saw the same pain in his eyes that was clawing at my chest. "You're with her, aren't you?" he asked, nodding toward the window. I stared at him, heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" He let out a bitter laugh, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Claire," he said flatly, "she's been playing us both." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, my mind racing to catch up. "What do you mean, both of us?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair, his jaw tightening. "I've been seeing her for almost 2 years. I didn't know about you until recently." The ground felt like it was shifting beneath me. 2 years? My Claire, the woman I was about to propose to, had been living a double life, splitting her heart between me and a stranger I'd never met. Or so I thought. Because in that moment, standing on the cold sidewalk with the ring still in my pocket and betrayal thick in the air, I realized something even darker. This wasn't just about us. Claire wasn't just cheating on me, or him. She was hiding something bigger, a web of lies far more tangled than either of us could imagine. And as the stranger and I stood there, united by heartbreak and disbelief, one thing became painfully clear. We weren't the only ones caught in Claire's game. We were just the ones who finally saw the truth. I stared at him, this stranger who knew Claire as intimately as I did, or maybe even more. The revelation sat between us like a live wire, crackling with disbelief and a shared sense of humiliation. His face was tight, his jaw clenched like he was holding back more than just words. 2 years. I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper, like saying it too loud would make it more real. "You're telling me Claire's been with you for 2 years? He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yeah. I didn't know about you until a couple of weeks ago." His voice was flat, like he'd rehearsed this in his head 1,000 times, but still couldn't believe it himself. "She always said she wasn't ready for anything serious, that she needed space." He laughed bitterly. "Guess I know why now." I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. 13 years. 13 years of memories, of birthdays and holidays, of lazy Sunday mornings tangled up in each other. And she'd been slipping away from me for at least 2 of them, maybe more. I thought about the nights she'd come home late, the sudden work trips, the excuses that didn't quite add up. I'd written them all off. "We're just in a rut," I told myself. "It happens in long relationships." But no, it wasn't a rut. It was a carefully constructed lie. The stranger rubbed the back of his neck, his breath visible in the cold night air. "I came here tonight to confront her," he admitted. "Thought maybe I could. I don't know. Get some answers. Closure, maybe." He let out another humorless chuckle. Didn't expect to find you standing here. I swallowed hard, my throat dry like I'd been walking through a desert with no end in sight. What's your name? I asked, realizing I didn't even know this man's name. This man who was living a parallel life with the woman I thought I knew. Jake, he said, offering a hand. I stared at it for a beat too long before shaking it, the absurdity of the moment settling in. Two men shaking hands outside a restaurant, both in love with the same woman, both equally betrayed. I'm Ethan, I said quietly, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. We stood there in silence, watching through the glass as Claire and her mystery man laughed over their wine. The man leaned in closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, the same way I used to, the same way Jake probably had. I could feel the rage simmering beneath the surface, but it was tangled up with something worse, shame. How had I been so blind? How had I let this happen right under my nose? What do we do now? Jake asked, breaking the silence. The question hung in the air like smoke. What do we do now? Do we confront her right here, right now, in front of everyone? Do we burst through the doors, shatter the illusion she'd so carefully crafted, and expose her for what she really was? But something stopped me. No, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Not here. Not like this. Jake looked at me, confused. Why the hell not? Because, I said, my mind racing. If she's been playing both of us, who's to say there aren't more? The idea hit me like a freight train. What if Claire wasn't just juggling two lives? What if this went deeper than we realized? We need to find out the whole truth. Jake's eyes darkened with understanding. You're saying she might be seeing other people? I nodded. Yeah. And I want to know exactly who the hell I've been sharing my life with before I do anything. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of our shared betrayal sinking in. Then Jake nodded, his jaw tightening with resolve. All right, he said. Let's find out who Claire really is. And just like that, two strangers became unlikely allies in unraveling the web of lies spun by the woman we both thought we loved. But neither of us was prepared for what we were about to discover. The night stretched out in front of us like an open wound. Jake and I walked aimlessly, neither of us ready to go home, wherever home was supposed to be now. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional hum of a passing car, but the noise in my head was deafening. I kept replaying the last few weeks, the subtle signs, the shifts in Claire's behavior that I dismissed as stress or routine. I thought I knew her. Every quirk, every habit, every unspoken thought. But standing here with Jake, the weight of our betrayal heavy between us, I realized I hadn't known her at all. How long have you two been living together? Jake asked, breaking the silence as we turned down a dim side street. I shoved my hands in my pockets, feeling the sharp edge of the ring box dig into my thigh. It felt like a cruel joke now, a symbol of how blind I'd been. We've been together 13 years, I said quietly, living together for almost 10. Jake let out a low whistle. Shit. And here I was thinking 2 years was a long time. It was a long time. Too long for someone to lie and sneak around, to build a life on a foundation of deceit. But Claire hadn't just built one life. She'd built two, and maybe more. We ended up at a small 24-hour diner, the kind with flickering neon lights and sticky linoleum floors. The waitress barely glanced at us as she poured 2 cups of coffee, her eyes hollow from the late shift. We sat in a booth by the window, the bitter scent of burnt coffee mingling with the staleness of regret. We need to be smart about this, I said, stirring my coffee even though I had no intention of drinking it. If we confront her now, she'll spin some story, twist it around like we're the ones who are crazy. I've seen her do it before, with friends, coworkers. She's good at it. Jake nodded, his jaw tight. So what do you suggest? We play detective? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through Claire's recent messages. Nothing suspicious. She was careful, too careful. We need to find out who that guy was tonight, I said. And if there are more. Jake leaned back, rubbing his face. I've got some of her texts from the past few months. I never thought to look deeper, but maybe there's something there. We spent the next hour comparing notes, dates, times, little inconsistencies that didn't make sense until now. The puzzle pieces started to fit, and the picture they formed was uglier than I could have imagined. She told me she was at a conference in Chicago 3 months ago, Jake said, scrolling through his phone. Sent me photos from her hotel room. My stomach clenched. She told me she was visiting her sister in Boston that same week. We stared at each other, the realization sinking in. She wasn't in Chicago or Boston. She's got a whole damn calendar, Jake muttered, shaking his head. Different lies for different people. I clenched my fists under the table, the rage simmering just beneath the surface. We need more. Proof. Something she can't deny. Jake nodded slowly, his eyes hard. I know a guy, he said after a moment. Private investigator. He's expensive, but he's good. Helped my buddy catch his ex-wife cheating last year. The idea of hiring a PI felt like something out of a bad movie, but this wasn't just about catching Claire in the act. This was about understanding how deep her lies went. I needed to know, even if it destroyed me. Do it, I said. Let's find out who the hell Claire really is. Jake made the call, his voice low as he explained the situation. The PI, some guy named Marcus, agreed to meet us the next day. We left the diner in silence, the cold air hitting me like a slap to the face. It was nearly dawn, the sky tinged with that gray, lifeless light that made everything feel more real, more raw. As we parted ways, Jake clapped a hand on my shoulder. We'll get through this, he said, though his eyes betrayed the uncertainty in his voice. I nodded, but deep down, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Except one thing. Claire wasn't the woman I thought I knew. And I wasn't stopping until I found out who she really was. By morning, the weight of everything settled in like a bad hangover. I hadn't slept. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 13 years. Each one tainted now, like a film reel warped by heat. Claire's smile, her laugh, the way she'd curl up next to me on cold nights. It all felt like someone else's life, someone else's memories. Jake texted me around 9 a.m., meeting the PI at noon. You in? Yeah, I replied, though I wasn't sure I was ready for what we'd find. We met Marcus at a hole-in-the-wall cafe downtown. He was exactly what you'd expect from a PI. Gritty, no nonsense, the kind of guy who probably had dirt on half the city. After hearing our story, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. She's running more than just a side gig, he said. Sounds like she's juggling lives. He took our info, dates, addresses, names, and promised to dig up everything he could. Give me 48 hours, he said, sliding on his sunglasses like we were in some noir film. You'll get your answers. I wasn't sure if I wanted them. The next 2 days crawled by. I went through the motions, work, home, pretending like everything was normal. Claire texted me like nothing had happened, asking about dinner plans, sharing photos of a dog she saw on her lunch break. I responded, short and sweet, playing along while my insides twisted with every message. Jake and I stayed in touch, swapping theories and piecing together more inconsistencies. The more we talked, the clearer it became. Claire wasn't just cheating. She was living an entirely different life, maybe multiple lives. And we were just scratching the surface. Then, finally, the call came. Marcus didn't mince words. You're not gonna like this, he said. He was right. Claire wasn't just seeing me and Jake. There was another guy. A doctor named Ryan who lived 2 cities over. They'd been together for over a year. Photos, text logs, even hotel receipts. It was all there, laid out like a twisted resume of betrayal. She's good, Marcus admitted. Real good. But not good enough. Jake and I met that night in his car, staring at the folder Marcus had handed over. Claire's smiling face stared back at us from different angles, with different men, in different cities. The woman we loved didn't exist. She was a ghost wearing a mask. Jake slammed the folder shut. We confront her, he said, his voice hard. Tonight. But I shook my head. The anger was there, boiling under my skin, but I wasn't ready to explode. Not yet. No, I said quietly. Not tonight. Because I had a better idea. I wasn't going to just confront Claire. I was going to expose her. The idea came to me in the dead of night, staring at the ceiling like it held the answers. Confronting Claire in private wasn't enough. She'd spin her lies, cry her tears, and maybe even convince us we were the ones to blame. But Claire thrived in the shadows, hiding behind half-truths and charm. I wanted to rip the mask off in the light of day. Jake was all in the moment I pitched the plan. Public humiliation, he said, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, I'm in. We decided on a dinner. Claire had been begging to host a small get-together with some of our friends, saying we needed to reconnect. The irony made me want to laugh and throw up at the same time. But it was perfect. She'd invite her friends, maybe even slip up and bring one of the other guys into the fold. She wouldn't see it coming. I sent her a text the next morning. Let's do that dinner Friday. I've been thinking, you're right. We need this. Her reply came almost instantly. I knew you'd come around. Can't wait, babe. Friday came faster than I expected. Jake and I had spent the week gathering more dirt, cross-referencing Marcus's findings with our own. It was worse than we thought. Claire wasn't just juggling relationships. She had entire personas. She told Jake she was wary of commitment, told me she was ready to settle down, and told Ryan she was considering moving in with him. She was a chameleon, shifting colors depending on the light. By the time the evening rolled around, I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The apartment was spotless, Claire's doing, of course. She flitted around the kitchen, humming under her breath like the perfect girlfriend. I watched her from the doorway, the weight of what I knew pressing down on me like a boulder. You okay? She asked, turning to flash me that familiar smile. Yeah, I lied smoothly. Just nervous. Big night. She laughed, walking over to press a kiss to my cheek. It's just friends, Ethan. Relax. If only she knew. The doorbell rang at 7 o'clock sharp. The first wave of guests arrived, friends from work, a couple of Claire's colleagues. I kept my cool, smiling and making small talk like nothing was wrong. But every time the door opened, my heart raced. Then, at 7:30, it happened. Jake walked in. Claire's smile froze for a split second, just long enough for me to catch it, before she plastered on her usual charm. Oh, she said, recovering quickly. You must be Ethan's friend. I've heard so much about you. Jake played his part perfectly. Likewise, he said, his eyes cold behind the smile. Ethan's told me all about you. The tension crackled between us, invisible to everyone else. Claire had no idea her world was about to collapse. But the best part? We weren't even close to finished. Because Ryan was on his way, too. It was almost poetic, really. Claire's laughter floated through the room, light and effortless, as if she wasn't standing on a trap door about to give way. She moved between guests like a seasoned performer, her hand brushing mine in passing, her smile never slipping. But I knew. Jake knew. And soon, Ryan would, too. At 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. I caught Jake's eye across the room, a flicker of anticipation tightening his jaw. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place. I opened the door to find him standing there, holding a bottle of wine, completely unaware of the disaster he'd walked into. Ryan was taller than I expected, with that polished, confident air doctors seemed to carry. His eyes lit up when he saw Claire over my shoulder. Hey, babe, he said, stepping inside like he owned the place. I felt Jake stiffen behind me. Babe. The word hung in the air like a loaded gun. Claire's face drained of color for a heartbeat before she snapped back into character. Ryan, I didn't think you'd make it, she said, her voice only slightly higher than usual. She shot me a quick glance, gauging my reaction. I smiled. Let her wonder. Of course, I said smoothly, taking Ryan's coat. The more, the merrier. The energy in the room shifted as Ryan mingled with the guests, completely oblivious to the storm brewing. Claire tried to juggle it, introducing Ryan as an old friend from college, while sneaking nervous glances at me and Jake. But the cracks were showing. Jake played his part perfectly, making casual conversation with Ryan, asking just the right questions, pushing just enough. I hovered nearby, savoring every flicker of panic that crossed Claire's face. Then, when the tension was stretched so tight it felt like the walls themselves would snap, I raised my glass. Everyone, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's a special night for Claire and me. Claire's eyes widened, her smile faltering for the first time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring box. Gasps echoed through the room. Claire's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes flicking between me, Jake, and Ryan in rapid succession. But before I propose, I continued, my voice steady, there's something we need to clear up. I turned to Jake. Jake, how long have you and Claire been seeing each other? The room went silent. All eyes shifted to Claire, whose face had gone ghostly pale. Jake didn't miss a beat. About 2 years, he said, his voice flat. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. But I wasn't done. I turned to Ryan. And you, Ryan? How long have you been dating Claire? Ryan blinked, his confusion turning to horror as the pieces clicked into place. Over a year, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Claire's breath hitched, her eyes darting wildly as the room erupted into chaos. What the hell is going on? Ryan barked, stepping back from Claire like she'd burned him. Claire stammered, her hands outstretched as if she could physically hold the lies together. It's not, Ethan, I can explain. This isn't. Don't, I cut her off, my voice cold and sharp. Don't insult us with more lies. Jake tossed the folder Marcus had given us onto the coffee table, photos spilling out like the receipts of her betrayal. The evidence was undeniable. Claire, with each of us, in different cities, different lives. The guests were frozen, eyes wide, watching the train wreck unfold in real time. Claire's facade finally crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, but there was no sympathy left in the room. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she whispered, her voice cracking. I loved you. All of you. Jake let out a bitter laugh. You don't know the first thing about love? Ryan shook his head in disgust, grabbing his coat. You're sick. I stood there, ring still in hand, staring at the woman I thought I knew. Goodbye, Claire, I said quietly, slipping the ring back into my pocket. And then I walked out the door, leaving her lies behind. The cold air hit me like a cleanse, sharp and bracing. Jake followed a few steps behind, silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. Well, he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets, that was something. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah, it was. We stood there for a beat, the weight of everything sinking in. The betrayal, the lies, the years we'd both lost to someone who didn't deserve them. But there was something else, too, a strange sense of relief. She won't fool anyone else now, Jake muttered, kicking at a loose stone on the pavement. No, I agreed. She won't. We parted ways after that. No promises, no plans. Just 2 men who'd been dragged through the same fire, emerging a little scorched but standing. The ring stayed in my pocket for a while longer, a reminder of what I thought I had, and what I'd finally let go. And for the first time in years, I felt free. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.